The end of World War II brought an end to one of the darkest periods of human history. After the many years of fighting, much of the world found itself greatly devastated and in shambles. One of the greatest issues with World War II was that it greatly affected many civilian populations across both Europe and the Far East and Pacific. Entire cities had been burnt to the ground. Infrastructure and industry had been devastated in many countries that had become battlefronts during the war. And many thousands of people found themselves with no home, with no food, and with no means of taking care of any wounds or issues they had following the end of this great conflict. Now, from the ashes of this conflict, a new world order had been established in Europe as a failsafe to prevent such a conflict from ever occurring again. And this was the United Nations. The United Nations wanted to serve as a committee which could bring all of the sovereign countries of the world together so that it could deal with any political or socioeconomic issues before they could result in such a devastating war again. Now, one of the first tasks that the United Nations was faced with after its conception after the end of the war was to rebuild much of the war which had been destroyed following the near decade of conflict that had existed. And one of the great topics that came up that needed to be addressed was the great number of children and their families who required emergency food relief as well as health care relief following the conflict. And in order to combat this issue, the United Nations created the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, or UNICEF. Now, UNICEF is considered to be founded by Polish physician Ludwig Rachman, and he served as the founder and really brought up the idea of what UNICEF would initially be, and this would be an organization that needed to bring in money that was available from developed countries who would be within the United Nations, as well as private donations, which could also be collected from abroad, which could be used to provide the finances necessary to provide the emergency relief to children and their families in affected countries. And for the first 4 years after its founding on December 11th, 1946, that is how UNICEF performed, with much of its funding coming from the developed nations who were in the United Nations, but also from wealthy donors who gave donations to the foundation voluntarily. Now, in 1950, UNICEF was changed from simply a organization that was created to rebuild the world after World War II to a foundation which would always serve children and mothers in developing countries in need of food and healthcare relief. Now, UNICEF, as of 2008, had a total income that year of over $3 billion. And that is a substantial amount of money for an organization where 92% of its total income goes into its relief programs. Now, 2/3 of this money is still acquired from the industrialized nations which exist in the United Nations, who continue to give the money to this United Nations organization. But 1/3, so over $1 billion of their income is acquired through private company and individual donations. And these are largely brought by 34 national committees that UNICEF has within some of the more industrialized countries in the world. Now, some of the ways that they try to acquire these individual donations is by communicating what their goal is to as many people as possible through a variety of means of communication. Now, one of their more well-known donation shout-outs and methods of getting their organization out to the public is through the UNICEF trick-or-treat boxes. Now, this was started back in 1950, and essentially in the United States and Canada, where Halloween exists as a big holiday for kids to go door to door asking people for treats, UNICEF hands out these authorized collection boxes to children who are interested, and the children can go door to door, and instead of getting candy for themselves, can ask door to door for small cash donations to be put into these official boxes. And after the night is over, they then can turn in these boxes to the official UNICEF volunteer groups, and this money will then be sent into and distributed through the UNICEF organization. And again, it's an effective way of communicating to many people in one quick sweep what UNICEF is and what it's trying to accomplish and why it might be beneficial for people to donate some money to it. Now, another big means that UNICEF is able to acquire its vast nonprofit funds is through partnerships with a variety of corporations and sponsors. Recently, UNICEF has gotten into sponsorship deals with multiple athletic organizations such as European football, rugby, and other international sports leagues to have these leagues pledge to donate funds to UNICEF, and in exchange they are able to put the UNICEF logo in their stadiums and even on their uniforms. And for extremely popular sports across the world that get millions of people watching them, it serves as another great shotgun approach to just getting as many people seeing the UNICEF logo and getting a quick understanding of what UNICEF is, what it provides, and why it might be beneficial for them as individuals to donate to UNICEF. And in addition to the millions of dollars that they receive from the sponsorships, it can very quickly add up the funds for this nonprofit organization to help it do even more around the world. And another means of partnership that it has is that UNICEF has had many different partnerships with various corporations. Its literacy and education program is often supported by large corporations which can donate millions and millions of dollars to the programs, and in exchange for donating to UNICEF, there is a mutual benevolence between these two programs. UNICEF, of course, does get a large sum that allows them to continue their works across the world, and the corporations that donate are able to both use these charitable donations as effective tax reductions for their companies, but also are able to use UNICEF to get their names out around the world, and with any luck, provide additional income to the companies for their work with UNICEF. By this mutual benevolence between these companies, many people are able to learn about both of them, and a lot of goals can be met. Another program is that UNICEF has recently partnered with the Crucell NV medical company, and UNICEF was able to purchase $110 million worth of vaccination from this company, which does allow many people across the world to get vaccines for many common pathogens which are very prevalent in developing nations. And as a result, UNICEF is able to get widespread medical relief, and this company is able to effectively use their products across the world, as well as get international notoriety for their services. And UNICEF, by being present in so many developed countries at one time with its national committees, with each one serving as a non-governmental nonprofit organization, can be very effective in talking to many different companies in many different parts of the world at one time. Additionally, there is also the fact that UNICEF has worked with large corporations across the world to help improve their company labor standards. And this can definitely help large companies spread easier into international society. UNICEF is able to find companies which are interested in expanding into international trade, but in order to do so must first improve their company's national labor regulations, particularly in child labor laws, in order to match international labor laws. And so UNICEF is able to send employees of the company employees of UNICEF to these interested companies, and by using a set of guidelines which takes from international labor laws as well as past UNICEF improvement projects, they are able to effectively communicate to these interested companies how they can improve their labor standards and update their factories in order to match the international laws. And this is very effective in communicating, as by working hand in hand with these company heads and then leaving them with an extensive how-to manual to allow a due diligence process for the companies to improve themselves. It has helped greatly in allowing companies to expand what they can do as far as trade, and at the same time improve conditions for workers and prevent a need for child labor in many of these countries. And perhaps one of the most famous means of UNICEF communicating its goals to the world is through the Ambassador at Large program that it has. Now, the Ambassador at Large program is a UNICEF function wherein celebrities from all major countries around the world that UNICEF either has a national committee in or has interest in helping, these celebrities from these countries are able to partner with UNICEF and earn a title of Ambassador at Large. And this gives these celebrities a position of responsibility to both maybe visit areas that UNICEF is trying to help at the current time by promoting fundraisers or speeches in order to spread the word of what UNICEF is trying to accomplish, and in doing so, increase international knowledge of UNICEF's programs and perhaps get more individual sponsors to donate to UNICEF's charities. Now, when I say celebrities, some of the most popular ambassadors at large have been the original one in 1954, Danny Kaye, who was a very popular American actor and performer at the time, but since then, such individuals who have served as UNICEF ambassadors at large have included actors Martin Lawrence, Ewan McGregor, Tom Hiddleston from the United Kingdom, more recently Katy Perry and Angelina Jolie. And this works greatly to UNICEF's benefit because it allows these celebrities to use their already great fame and media attention that they draw to be able to effectively communicate UNICEF's message to the media outlets which are already focused on their celebrity. And this has served to be very, very impressive because ambassadors at large have been able to encourage large charity shout-outs as well as increase UNICEF knowledge to their respective countries of celebrity and even internationally if they, depending on how large their celebrity status is. And it has served as a very effective tool for UNICEF to communicate their message abroad by using these delegates to bring to the attention what UNICEF is trying to do. UNICEF has become a very successful nonprofit organization over 70 years as a result of it understanding how to speak to the world effectively and who they need to talk to in order to get the services that their nonprofit is trying to use to make the world a better place. They understand how to both speak themselves to the population, but as well use other people who are very good at speaking to a population already to spread their message and in order to expand their nonprofit organization's abilities. I think by using these effective communication techniques, UNICEF will continue to grow and continue to do very good works across the world. Thank you for your time, and I hope this explained a little bit about UNICEF for you.